Welcome everyone to the Wake Up Call channel. This is a perfect example to use to show people that all the elections are completely fake. They are completely fake and they're completely rigged. And these people who continue to get placed in office are continually placed in office by the shadow government because nobody would ever vote for these people. Claudia Sheinbaum has been elected, wink, wink, the first woman president of Mexico. You know, at a time period where we have this border crisis where we're actually moving closer to having the North American Union, which is really part of the blueprint of how this is going to lay out with the borders in the United States between Canada, America, and Mexico and America. And is it a surprise the last name is Sheinbaum? I mean, is it surprising anybody? Did she have a mass celebration? Did she bring in bagels from all around the world? I mean, we're talking about Mexico, and we have this hand-selected climate scientist, okay, who was put into power. Not only that, it gets even funnier to show you how they just control and manipulate this stuff. According to what they're telling us, there were 37, that's right, 37 assassinations during the election period. Think about that. Think about one assassination, let alone 37. I'm surprised it wasn't 33, but anybody who was running against Claudia, well, they ended up turning into Luca Brasi and sleeping with the fishes. So let me show you what just occurred in Mexico. And if you don't know how a hand-selected candidate looks, well, here's a perfect example. Peekaboo says Claudia as Claudia holds the 666 right over her eye. Now, could anybody give an actual reasonable explanation as to why this climate scientist is holding a 666 up over her eye? Or can anybody tell me the real answer of how or who put this person? Oh, it's Larry Fink. Of course, buddies with Larry Fink and BlackRock. So we know these are the people like Larry Fink who the civilians should be focusing their energy on and arresting. People like Larry Fink, Jeff Bezos. Instead, everybody focuses their energy on Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, and they fall for the characters in the performance instead of the actual people who are moving the puppets around and pulling the strings. People like Larry Fink, who out in the open talk about what they want to do in the future is control human behavior. Now, they already do control human behavior because we see just how far they've gone with manipulating the human brain. We have people out there castrating their own children. We've apparently convinced people that they're born with a certain sexual preference. They've been doing it for a long period of time. But the real behavioral control they're talking about comes with the climate agenda. So it seems very fitting that Claudia was selected, being that Claudia is a climate scientist. So we know what that means. But here's what just occurred in Mexico. Of course, this is all staged and part of the show. 37 candidates assassinated so they could put Claudia into power.
All right, we're going to go now to Mexico, where voters have just elected the country's very first female president. Claudia Sheinbaum was the handpicked candidate to succeed the current president amid tensions with the U.S., of course, over those border crossings. Enrique Acevedo is in Mexico City for us with more on the election that was heavily overshadowed by violence.
Celebrations in the street of Mexico City overnight to usher in President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum. On Sunday, thousands line up in the sweltering heat, some even camping out overnight, to vote for the 61-year-old former climate scientist.
Es importante nosotros enseñarle a nuestros hijos que es un derecho que nuestros antepasados, pues.
It's important for you to show your daughter that she can be president, de que ella puede ser presidenta también.
Sí, claro que.
But while Sheinbaum brings a new face to the presidency, will it be a new era for Mexico? The president-elect campaigned on social welfare policies that boosted broad support for her predecessor and political mentor, current President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. But one of the biggest issues remains security and violence. Mexico has seen a 150% uptick in violence, with 37 candidates assassinated during the election cycle, the murders linked to cartels who control much of the drug trade in the U.S.
For the first time, it kind of like makes sense for criminal organizations to try to control local governance. They are targeting mayors, right? And mayors are in charge of local police.
And while immigration remains a lightning rod in American politics, it's a topic most Mexican candidates avoided.
When push comes to shove, it is the U.S. policy that Mexico will have to adapt to rather than Mexico having its own migration policy.
And as one of the U.S. most crucial economic partners, leaders in Washington will be watching closely to see which direction Mexico takes under its new leadership.
Particularly in terms of Mexican stability and Mexican reliability for the U.S.
For CBS Mornings, Enrique Acevedo, Mexico City.
And of course, we all know who else loves Claudia. If Larry Fink loves Claudia, then the World Economic Forum must also love Claudia. And they do. They even have an article up from 2019, I believe it is, where it says Mexico unveils gender-neutral school uniform policy. And of course, if you read in the fine print there, it says children who attend state-run schools in Mexico City will no longer have to abide by a gender-specific dress code for their school uniforms, government officials said on Monday. Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican capital's left-wing mayor, announced the new gender-neutral uniform policy during a press conference at a local school in the city. The era when girls had to wear a skirt and boys had to wear trousers has been left behind. I think that's passed into history. Boys can wear skirts if they want, and girls can wear pants if they want. The new policy will take effect immediately, the Mexican Education Ministry later said in a tweet, okay? So, same blueprint for all these people that get put into power, right? None of them believe in genders anymore. They're all pushing the climate agenda onto everybody. And when you watch these people speak, and you just take yourself away from the emotion, from being emotionally attached to these stories and loathing these people, there's no chance that anybody's voting for them. The people in Mexico might be more, look, we know what the perception is on the news of the crimes and et cetera, but there's no chance that the civilians in Mexico are voting for this woman to be their next president. There's no chance. There's zero chance. And this is what's happening around the world right now. We saw it in other countries when they protested in Spain. We've seen it in Brazil. They're not picking these people. And the civilians are starting to realize that these people are unelected. But in most countries, the civilians are unarmed, so they can't do anything about it. And then they just call them election deniers. The same thing is happening in America, right? The only difference is that the American civilians are armed and the government needs to create false flags and staged events around it so that they could either unarm those people or imprison those people for disagreeing with what are clearly rigged elections. Now, the other thing with Claudia, I mentioned the climate activist or climate scientist. I guess that's the newest term, right? We're now linking the word climate with science so that they can convince people even more that all stuff climate related is science. And if you question that, you're a criminal and you can't question the science. So you can't question when the government tells you that you need to be locked up. You need all this technology around you to track your every purchase, your every movement, because it could affect the carbon emissions while they're flying around in private jets all around the world. You're not supposed to say boo, right? So Claudia Sheinbaum can decarbonize Mexico's economy and make it sustainable. So one day after being put into power, the articles are already out there about Claudia, how Claudia can decarbonize Mexico. And that seems to be the main agenda here, the main goal, right? Which for people out there that don't realize this, it means that you're going to be less dependent on yourself and more dependent on the government because they're going to start controlling how much electricity you can use. They're going to start controlling how much movements you can make, how much stuff you can purchase, right? Your carbon footprint ties into every single thing that you do, literally, because you're breathing. Remember, the carbon that they want to stop is you from breathing, okay? And that means that they're going to keep you limited in your home, which is, again, your prison cell. They've slowly got all of us to bring this technology into our home, this technology that our own government the NSA, everyone knows they exist. And if you don't, now you do. And they go, well, what is the NSA doing? What do you think the NSA is doing? You think the NSA is listening in on private conversations going on in Afghanistan? You kidding me? They're listening and monitoring us. They're making sure that the civilians aren't trying to rise up against what they're doing. That's why they're so hell-bent on listening to us and tracking us, because they're a small group of people. And they know that there's a large group of us, and the large group of us could stop this from happening. This is illegal, what's occurring. These are not elected people. There's no proof that they were ever voted into power other than them telling us on the television set. So we've turned our homes into prisons, right? We turned our homes into prisons with our television that you could talk into the remote and tell the remote what channel to put on. You got cameras on your laptop, your phone, your iPad, your iPod. et cetera, et cetera. Nobody realizes that they've done that. So now the next step is convincing you that you need to stay inside. They just tried it in 2021, and it worked for a period of time. Because a lot of people didn't have a choice because nothing was open. So you weren't allowed to go anywhere. Some places they told you if you left past curfew, you'd go to prison. So you were forced to be a prisoner in your home because you were supposed to be afraid that you might get a runny nose. That was a test experiment. The carbon footprint is life permanently like that, okay? Your behavior changes. They monitor what you buy, what you do, and they tell you it's all in the name of carbon. So they put Claudia in there to begin this transition, and they like to select, in some case, in a case like this, they put a female in because you're not allowed to question her because she's a woman, right? You're sexist if you question her, just like when they put these lunatics in America because they're trying to destroy the transportation. They put Pete Buttigieg in, right? Well, Pete Buttigieg gay, so if you question him, you're homophobic, right? That's how this works. But what you're seeing is global communism being set up all around us. And I would guarantee you the civilians in Mexico are not buying this. In America, okay, the Democrats in this country are so, like they're living in a different world, but they think that we're actually living in a different reality. They don't know what communism is. They don't understand it. They just think that it's being a nice person, sharing, until, of course, they start realizing that everything is shared. So these people who are very narcissistic too and selfish, when they suddenly realize they have to share their home, they're like, oh yeah, I'll share with a homeless person. Oh, okay. And then they permanently live in your bedroom with you and your wife. And they're like, that'll never happen. That's exactly what communism is. There's no private property, period. And that's what they're pushing towards. And that's obviously something we've seen with the World Economic Forum talking about owning nothing, being happy. Everybody talks about it, but they don't realize what it really is. It's communism under the name of woke. So they've hijacked all of the governments around the earth, and they're putting all these people into power, and they're getting everyone to be divided and bicker with each other over the political affiliation. Oh, I'm a Democrat, so I can't question my party. Oh, I'm a Republican, so I got to stick with Trump. Instead of realizing that both parties are working together to do this. They're working together to bring down the process, the democratic process, whatever we want to call the process. America's supposed to be a republic. They call it a democracy. Nobody even questions that. That's the point that we've gotten to, right? So nobody's going to believe that Claudia Sheinbaum, okay, somebody who, isn't even Mexican, right, was elected after what? What did they claim? 37 people were assassinated? I mean, you kidding me? And how about the fact that she's doing the all-seeing eye? You know what I mean? Like, that's one of those things you see where you go, you got to think about it, put it in perspective. I show you all these montages, these collages, whatever you want to call them, of these celebrities doing this on magazine covers, right? Bono, Beyonce, Rihanna, everyone you could find doing it, okay? That's one thing. It's very difficult to find politicians doing this out in the open. Now, Trump does it, but he doesn't often do it over his eye. This is another one doing it out in the open. What is the actual explanation for the photograph of her doing a 666 over her eye? I mean, is this something that any of you do? I mean, if you didn't know about what this symbol meant, is this something you would normally do? No, it's not, right? And of course, when you see Claudia here, buddy with Larry Fink, that's all you need to know. Larry Fink and these people are putting them in power. These are the people who are destroying our way of life. They're the ones who are dividing us. They're the ones causing all this anxiety in your life. They're the ones who are doing things without your permission, like putting these 5G towers up all around us that are causing depression, anxiety, all these things that you're wondering why you're feeling a certain way. You could blame people like Larry Fink. Larry Fink should be arrested. And that's being very kind if you look at the damage that these people have done. Because they're not just causing damage from a standpoint of stress. There's a lot of people who are completely unhinged, whose lives are completely destroyed. They put them through a form of trauma-based mind control at a young age, convincing them to castrate themselves. These are the people right here. And Larry Fink, just like his buddy Claudia here, they follow a certain book that you're not allowed to talk about. And then in that book, you'll find the origins of all of this stuff with gender identity, right? It all goes back to a certain group of people. Some of them like to wear a red bracelet and identify themselves that way. Other ones, you can just identify them by looking at them, and these are two of them. So this is what has happened in Mexico. This is the pattern we're seeing around the world right now. Unelected people getting put into positions of power. Then they try to convince you that they're actually elected, which they're talking about already in Mexico, how things are going to change drastically in the fall because all these liberals are in power now, and the people have spoken, and they've put them in power, and they're about to ruin their way of life. right? They're about to destroy their way of life because none of these people realize what the climate agenda is. They just keep hearing about it. They keep getting told about it. Now they're linking words like science to it. They don't understand. But if they understood that the government is going to shut off bank accounts, monitor everything you buy, right? So in other words, you want to throw a party on Friday night, you want to have burgers and dogs, there's going to be a limit on how many hamburgers you can get, right? And eventually there's going to be no meat. You can get 4 plant-based burgers. You're having 20 people, tough. Each one of you gets a quarter of the food. And people go, that's crazy. That's exactly what they're telling you it is. They're going to track your carbon emissions. So when you hear them say, we're going to track your carbon emissions, we're going to put people like Claudia in power, we're going to put all these climate lunatics in power. And they're not lunatics, they're sinister. This is a sinister act. There's nothing to do with the climate. This is why the Georgia Guidestones was all written about nature and climate, okay? Think about where the roots of all this stuff with this obsession with climate too, and paganism, and what it ties into, right? We're supposed to be witches or, grinding on grass and in love with trees and plants. They're using this to enslave us. This is Satan's plan, the climate agenda. So anyway, this person was not elected. It's very, very clear that this person was not elected. And every time these elections happen, you could tell that they're not elected. You could just look at them, listen to what they say. You can say, wow, okay, this is people evolving. This woman who supposedly unveiled gender-neutral school uniforms, you're telling me the civilians in Mexico voted for this? Of course they didn't vote for this. Just like in America, nobody's voting for this. And this isn't a MAGA thing. I'm not a supporter of MAGAs. Everybody knows, even though new people find the channel and they think that this is some type of MAGA channel. Both sides are working together to bring down the Constitution, to bring down the Bill of Rights, to bring it all down. And then the New World Order, like the phoenix rising from the ashes, emerges out of it. But they have to bring it down first. And they can only bring it down by blaming you for it, keeping you in the left-right divide, and making the civilians think it's for the betterment of them, that the Supreme Court and all these things don't work all of a sudden, which is why they're gaslighting you and bringing things up like Roe v. Wade out of thin air, bringing up Roe v. Wade and gaslighting the civilians. This is why they're getting these people to want to, go into school libraries and read to kids. This is all the government's doing. They're the ones planting the seeds and pushing this out. What do you think? A bunch of trans people got together and they're like, hey, we want to go to the public library. They started hearing about it on the news. They started to hear about it getting promoted. They started hearing stories about Christians protesting. All this stuff was done deliberately, put on national news. And they said, we're going to go do this because Christians are protesting against us. And all of a sudden, they don't even realize why they want to go to the library. Now, we know in some cases why they want to go because the percentages tell us that a lot of these people have a preference towards the youngsters, but can't get into that on here because you can't talk truth. So you can only limit what you could say. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you as always and your families.